Hello and welcome to the MB Om podcast, where you will learn to master the business of yoga with guests from around the world who have experienced becoming successful yoga teachers, studio owners, and much more. Now, here's your host, Amanda Kingsmith.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the MB Om podcast. I'm Amanda and I'll be your host for this and all episodes of the show. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by FavYogis. Do you teach privately? Make payment and registration a breeze. Use the FavYogis app to create and manage classes for your personal clients. Life is just easier with autopay. You can forget about remembering to Venmo, or if you're up in Canada, sending an invoice, an e-transfer, or PayPal, depending on where your clients are in the world. With FavYogis, you can use autopay to enable repeating payments. This will save you so much time and make things so much easier. You can also keep your calendars in sync. Google Calendar integration automatically updates teacher and student classes when you make changes. It's still just your yoga. Teachers add classes, students add teachers and students stay connected. Head on over to the App Store and find FavYogis, FavYogis. Use code MBOM and let them know that I sent you. This episode of the podcast is also brought to you in part by Offering Tree. When you're a yoga teacher and you're trying to build your digital presence, it can be daunting. First, you might need a website. There are a lot of great tools for building websites like WordPress, Wix, and Squarespace. Then you need a way to email your students. Again, there are tools for that like MailChimp and Constant Contact. But that's another account to pay for and another password to remember. Then you need a way to schedule and register your students. Again, there are tools for that, but it's another account to create and pay for and another password to remember. Oh wait, how do I integrate my scheduling tool with my website? Arrgh! Instead of putting all of this stuff off for another day because it's too daunting, let me tell you about a better way. Offering Tree set out to make creating your digital presence fun, easy, and affordable. With one account, you can create a website in minutes that has your schedule built right in. They also have email marketing tools to collect email addresses, send newsletters, and automated emails to your subscribers. It all works seamlessly together with one account and one subscription. To learn more about what Offering Tree can do for your digital presence, visit offeringtree.com/MBOM. Offering Tree has been supporting MBOM for close to a year now, and not only are they really changing the game for yoga teachers, making yoga business easy, they're also just really awesome people. They're a small business just like me, probably just like you, and I love that when I get to meet with them, I'm talking right with the co-founders. They're in it every single day, busting their butts to make a product that's really great, and I feel that when I use it. Offering Tree is providing special pricing for MBOM listeners, so be sure to visit offeringtree.com/MBOM to receive your discount. I am also super excited to announce a brand new partnership with Mind Body Online. You know the saying, people won't remember what you said, but they'll remember how you made them feel? That's true, both in our personal lives and in our business lives. MindBody is a company that knows every customer interaction is a chance for your business to shine and for you to help your customers thrive. With that simple truth in mind, MindBody has spent nearly 20 years sweating the details of what it looks like to design and run an extraordinary fitness or wellness business. From offering simple and seamless booking to being able to greet a new customer by name to the email that lands in their inbox with a great offer, they obsess over finding ways to allow you to craft a thoughtful, meaningful experience for your customers. Because they know it's the experience that makes a difference for you and your customers. Find out more about MindBody at mindbodyonline.com/pod. That's POD. Once again, it's mindbodyonline.com/pod. All right, now on to this episode of the podcast. I am super excited to be joined by Sytera Field from SyteraYoga. And if you're thinking that that name sounds familiar to you, it's probably because it is. Sytera has been on the podcast twice before, and it's been really, really cool to hear her story as her business grows and evolves. And when I talked to Sytera for the first time back in 2016, she was teaching private yoga full time. She was really not interested in the studio scene, both as a teacher and also as an owner. But over the course of, I guess, probably close to a year and a half, she shifted gears and decided to open a studio. And so on the second episode that we recorded in early 2018, a couple months after she opened the doors to SyteraYoga, we talked about what studio ownership was like for her. And it's so interesting because having her back on, we started this episode by talking about what studio ownership has been like for her. And we talk about what's changed over the last year and a half. And although many things have stayed the same in terms of her brand and her business and her vision, and there's also been lots of changes since she opened the doors to the studio back in January 2018. And we talk a lot about the lessons that she's learned through this experience, tips for other people who are opening a studio. And then we also dive into her latest project and adventure, which has actually been being developed over the last year, which is pretty crazy. And that is a massage ball that she's developed with a new method for rolling out the body. So the massage ball is called the Nadi Ball, Nadi Ball, and the method is called the Nadi Nice method. And one of the reasons I was really excited to have Sytera back on the podcast was so that we could talk about the business side of creating a product, because that's something that I've never done before. I have kind of looked into the whole import-export thing. What does it take to make your own products? Where do you get them from? How do you find the proper quality? How do you decide what you want to offer and what your audience is going to be interested in? And every time that I've ever looked into it, I'm just like, wow, there's so much here. There's so many companies. There's so many things to learn. And so I was really interested in talking to Sytera about what this process has been like from the business side of things, what the process has been like for getting the balls over to the US and finding something that's going to work for their business and actually launching this brand new business model essentially within the business that they already had. And so we talk a lot about that, which is super fun and super interesting. And then Sytera also shares lots of business lessons and all that good stuff that she's learned along the way. So if you haven't heard Sytera's background, Sytera's story, it would be super awesome to go back and listen to the first 2 episodes. You'll get a lot of context for the evolution of her business, which is really, really awesome and super fascinating to me, just, where she came from and where she's going with her business. So those are linked in the show notes if you want to go check them out. And if you already listened to those, then without further ado, here is Sytera. Sytera, welcome back to the podcast. I'm really excited to have you here with me today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Amanda.
Yeah, it's cool because I've been able to follow your journey, from teaching entirely privates to opening your studio, and now you've done so much more with your studio. So the last time we chatted, I think SyteraYoga had been open for like 3 or 4 months. Somewhere around that point. So you guys have been almost open for 2 years now. So can you kind of catch me up what's been going on over the last year and a half from the studio side of things?
Absolutely. Yeah, we opened our doors on January 1st, 2018. And within 9 months, we'd pretty much outgrown our britches. So we had to, we actually stayed in the same building, but we moved down to the first floor and got a bigger space with high ceilings and did a pretty big fit out. And now we have 2 studios, one that's smaller for individualized, one-on-one or small group classes. And then also a slightly bigger one that fits about 23 people. I mean, technically it could fit more, but I really like having, I don't like to have people feel cramped. We're very much about having a specific kind of experience at the studio. So it's kind of more about quality, not quantity for us. Mm-hmm. So even though, we've actually turned people away, if you can believe it, because it's really important to us that we have a certain kind of experience for people who come in and that they don't feel cramped and rushed and things like that. So that's kind of been part of our philosophy and it kind of resonates in how we use the space actually.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because I think there's a lot of people who are like, oh, but it's $20 or $25 more to have somebody else in there. But I think it is really important to consider the people who were there first type thing and making sure that they're getting the value out of what they're paying, because everyone's paying for the experience, right? Nobody likes like touching somebody's sweaty back or something like that.
Right. I mean, again, it kind of goes back to the whole reason of why I opened up. Well, God, it goes back to the whole reason of like why I started teaching yoga. I mean, I started teaching yoga because my teachers that I really liked actually moved out of the area, and I couldn't find a yoga class that I really liked. I mean, I found plenty that, I went to and got, great stuff out of, but, I felt like I'm just not that inspired in any of these classes. And so that's actually why I started teaching, is because I'm like, well, I can't find the class that I want. Why don't I create it? And that's exactly what happened with me in the studio. I couldn't find, I'd been at multiple studios, and I was just really unhappy with the way that they were treating their teachers. And I said, be the change, right? I mean, so that's actually why we started the studio, is because I wasn't feeling supported. And I know the people that I was teaching with, my peers, weren't feeling supported. And so, I had this long standing development that I had been, I had these private clients that I've been working with for, close to 2 decades. And so they all said, we'll come with you. We don't, the interesting thing about, being a studio owner is people don't really care that much about the studio space. I mean, they do. It's important to have a space that feels beautiful and welcoming and calming, and also kind of full of life. But at the same time, people come to a yoga class for the teacher, and we've always, from the very beginning, been very teacher focused. Like we actually help our teachers. It's important to us that our teachers build brand. And so we actually help them build their own brand and support them in all kinds of different ways. And because of that, we now have 12 teachers on staff. So we've grown our team, and everybody who's there really wants to be there, and it comes across, so it's pretty exciting for me, to be honest, because it was really kind of the experience that I wanted, like I said, when I was a teacher. And so it's really nice to be able to offer that up.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's amazing. And I know that that's it's cool to see the progression in kind of your business, just from when I talked to you back in 2016, where we had this conversation about how your studio experiences hadn't been great, which is why you took your teaching out of the studio. And then to kind of turn around and see the value in the studios, but be able to look and see okay, how can I do this differently? Which I think is really cool.
Yeah, I've gotten such great feedback from teachers, who are part of the team and not, who see that. And they're just like, wow, I just always felt like I was this, shuffled around commodity, underpaid and overworked and looked past. And that's exactly the opposite of what we're trying to do at the studio. So you're right. I mean, it's pretty gratifying. It feels really good to be able to kind of give back in some way.
Absolutely. What was it like to open up a second studio, pretty quick after you opened up your first studio? You went through all this work to create this first studio, and then to turn around and be okay, we're doing this all over again.
Yeah, it was pretty hectic. I mean, thank God I have this deep yogic breathing practice that I've been cultivating for, a couple decades. So yeah, it was, to be honest with you, it was pretty great to be able to put into action the things that we learned, almost, right away, 9 months later, because, right after we did the fit out upstairs, there was little things that were well, that wasn't quite the right choice, or things that we didn't even really know. You don't really know how people are going to respond to a space until you open it up and let them use it. And so we learned some really valuable lessons. And in some ways, I'm really glad that we did it that way, because we now have a much better, orders of magnitude better space. Again, going back to, the things that we wanted to cultivate in our own studio, as opposed to the way that I was experiencing teaching at other studios. I wanted to have an area that was very community focused, an area that people felt like they could linger and catch up. And now in this new space, we have that, upstairs. Whenever we had our original space, we didn't have that as much. So the whole point is we got to learn some lessons pretty quick, and then turn around and put that to good use. So, it was hard in terms of like money and time and, mentally wrapping your brain around it. But it actually, I think it benefited us greatly to have that sort of test run in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good point, actually. And I'm curious for people who are listening, who are potentially thinking about going down the route of opening studios, what were some of your biggest learnings that came out of, I guess, that like first part of the studio?
I mean, I think basically one of the biggest things that I've had to learn to get better at is, and this is not going to be surprising, but communication. And one of the great things about, being a yoga teacher for a long time is that it means I've had a long time to kind of refine my communication in class. So, when I'm describing things to people and asking people to go down this, journey with me in this class, it's really important to me that the people that I'm talking to understand my words very clearly, because I've found that, when you're teaching and people don't understand your words and they get kind of confused and pulled out of the moment and have to look around or ask a question or something like that, it really does change the experience for them. And that applied big time. I mean, that understanding and skill that I had been developing applies big time to be, in terms of being a studio owner and a boss and talking with clients and teachers. And yeah, it's one of the most valuable things. Because of that, I think we've been able to align our interests. Teachers and I have been able to align our interests. And when the interests are not aligned, it's not because of a communication issue. It's because it's just for whatever reason not working. And so, we'll part ways or whatever. But the whole point is like to having this clear communication, and with teachers and students has really been, I think, the reason why we're so successful in turning people away. Because again, there's no question about what we're aligning to, and it's okay if you don't align with that, right? It just means that this is not the right fit for you. So I think that's been hugely important, and that's again where, in my experience at other studios, people for the most part, they have good intentions. Like studio owners, they have good intentions. Like they're not, trying to overwork you or milk, probably. I would assume.
We hope.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Exactly. But sometimes that message just doesn't land, and so I think that, having this clear communication and the one-on-one connection, and really understanding where people are at, what their particular goals are for their teaching, and how it aligns with our studio or not, has been so important. I mean, it seems so obvious, but I don't think that it's paid enough attention to in the yoga world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. I think that, it's kind of like a complicated business model, right? Because it's like you're offering this service, but the service is actually coming from these other teachers that you hire. And, you want to have this like studio brand, but then you also want to like ensure that as the owner, you're having the teachers thrive as much as they can within that environment. So, it's definitely not an easy task to step into the role of a yoga studio owner, I don't think.
I think it's incredibly complicated. And I tell you, one of the reasons why is I think that I've discovered through this process that yoga teachers are like artists. I mean, we offer a very unique experience, like we're storytellers in a way, and we're choreographers, and we're, movement based and, story based. And it's a really like near and, it's very near and dear to people, they're offering. And, and so when we're talking about like, opening that up and monetizing that, it's, people get, not surprisingly, they can definitely retreat and say, well, I don't want to do that. And it's just more about like, well, what are you trying to, like, let's start with why. Why are you doing this? What do you want to do? How can the studio help support you do that? And I think, it applies to the clientele as well. I mean, to the students, they have a reason why they're going there. And sometimes, if something doesn't work out for whatever reason and, it doesn't align with the studio anymore, that's okay. Like it's about like, why are you here? Are you getting, what you need out of this, or is this not the right fit? And I don't know. I just not trying to be everything to everybody. Just really like being clear about your own intentions and what you can and can't do. I think it's probably the hardest thing to do that. But it's so important to success. I mean, I would say that's pretty much it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's all good stuff. And I think one of the other things that makes it complicated as well is kind of like when you bring the money side into it, and, it's like you're running a heart-centered business, but at the end of the day, it's a business. Like you have rent that you have to pay, you have expenses, you need to pay your teachers, you need to pay yourself. So it's like this balance of wanting to help people if you can, like if they need it, but then also like running a business. So I feel like that's another aspect that makes it particularly challenging.
Yeah, I agree. But I would also go back to the communication part of it is that people, like I said, I honestly do think that most yoga studio owners, there's a lot of yoga studios in our area. I don't know about yours, but there's a lot of yoga studios in our area that get a very bad rap because, they're paying their teachers nothing and they're, just kind of, it's all about the numbers, right? They offer these super cheap classes for people to come. And so they don't pay their teachers anything and their teachers are just in and out. Like they'll be there 2 months and then they'll leave. And it's less about the teacher and more about the studio. And I think that if, the yoga studio owners would be more clear with their instructors about what it is, their goals and the incentives, how it lines up or doesn't. I mean, you're not going to find success until you find those things aligning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I love that. And I really love as a yoga teacher myself, I really love like the appreciation and value that you put on your teachers at your studio. And I mean, it's obvious that it's working. I feel like you guys have had very little teacher turnover and teachers are very committed there, which is pretty awesome to see.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. It's been exciting.
And so is there anything else that you've learned over the last couple of years that you want to share with listeners about owning a studio?
Yeah. One of the things I'll just, it's kind of, on the upbeat note, kind of lighthearted is that, in a way I feel like, what I did was just kind of put this spark in this heart, and it's just beating on its own now. And it's really not about me anymore. I mean, even though it is, of course, right, it's got my name on it, because it was my original vision, but it's not about me. It's about the community and the teachers and the experience that goes on there. And I think that's real. It's really special to see that. My husband and I, who work together quite a bit on the business, just are constantly amazed that this thing is like has a life of its own now, and it's pretty spectacular. It's a great feeling.
It's like your fourth child.
Yeah, totally. I know. Like I needed another one.
Yeah, I'm sure you didn't. But it does kind of sound like that, though. It's like you create this thing and then you kind of are just like, okay, hopefully it can like function on its own. And I don't have children. I don't have children true. Myself, but I do feel like it is like you start seeing them become more like self-sufficient to the point where it's like they don't really like need you anymore. So it's cool to see a business do that too.
That's exactly right. And then it kind of morphs and evolves in ways that you didn't really see happening, right? And so you just support that because you realize, okay, that's really what's happening here. And I can either, try to control it and turn it to another direction, or I can support, where it's going. And that's exactly, that's exactly what you try to do as a parent, for better, for worse.
Yeah. Never really know what you're going to get, but it all turns out.
Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully. What has been like the biggest, I guess, in terms of like what your vision looked like? Like, if we were talking about this 2 years ago when you're about to open this studio and you were thinking of what your vision was 2 years in the future, like what's kind of different about the studio that you didn't necessarily expect?
Good question. So one of the things I think is different about it, maybe it's not necessarily different, but more just like a being really clear in with our intention. Again, like I felt like because we opened the studio, with it on a Kickstarter campaign, and it was some a few local teachers and my supporters that I'd had for a long time, that it was very supportive of kind of what was already there in a way, right? Like this yoga community that was really wanting a home, right? And now the fact that it's opened up, and we're getting, all kinds of different people coming, that's been pretty neat to see how it's sort of evolved, not just this, few people that I knew personally, but now it's again, it's so much bigger than that. And I think part of the reason why that has been successful is because our focus is honoring the individual and not honoring the yoga practice. And I'm sorry if I'm offending anyone, and I'm not trying to. What I'm trying to say is there's a rich tradition of this thing called yoga, and me and my teachers, like, again, we've been doing this stuff for, a couple decades. We understand and honor that tradition, but we don't focus our classes on the end goal is to honor the pose. In our studio, we use yoga, this thing called yoga, as a tool to honor the individual in each pose. So sometimes when you go to our classes, or especially my class, it will look like, is this even, a yoga class? I use these things called Nadi Balls in my class. And it's deeply rooted in that tradition, but I've kind of used the poses, I've sort of taken out sort of the essence, right? The rasa, if you want to go Sanskrit, that's my daughter's name, out of the sort of like the essence of the pose, and figured out ways to make that really accessible to people. And so what happens is you end up doing a yoga practice, a full, complete yoga practice. But it's all about, honoring yourself in that pose and not honoring what this thing called a pose is supposed to look like. So I think it's, it's kind of hard to explain. It's more like one of those things you got to kind of be there. But I think that's, one of the things that we hadn't gotten really clear with before we opened the studio. And then once we started being there, and I started talking with these teachers, and we just kind of kept refining until now the offering is 100% all about honoring the individual at that moment. So I think that individualized attention, that was always kind of, I think, there for me. I just hadn't really fully, recognized it in terms of, being really clear. So I think that's probably the main thing that's different.
Yeah. That's really interesting to hear. And I think that I almost, as you were talking, I was wondering like if that was something that you could have figured out before you opened, because it seems like there was like elements of it that existed obviously within your teaching and kind of within your beliefs and values. But it's like, to actually put that on paper as like, this is a part of our brand, I think is really hard to do until you're actually in it, experiencing what that experience is like.
Yeah, absolutely. And not surprisingly, because it's a, very rich, history and tradition, we had to really get clear on what we're talking about, and not just give it lip service, so that we can really demonstrate, that this is 100%, 110% yoga. It's just that it's very much focused not on continuing, to honor the pose in the moment, but the intention is to honor the individual in the moment. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think that that's really cool. And so I think good transition into talking about the Nadi Ball. I know that you've been teaching with different types of balls and bringing in Thai massage for a number of years into your practice. But can you kind of tell me like the backstory behind the Nadi Ball, like where this idea kind of came from?
Sure, absolutely. So I created this thing called it's Nadi and Nice yoga body rolling method, and it's NADI. NADI ball, Nadi Ball. Yeah, totally tongue in cheek, right? I mean, I use this thing like we put it under our butt and roll around. So it's like you got to kind of be willing to, laugh it off a little bit, but the effects of it are quite real. It's not a joke. So this the Nadi and Nice method. Like you said before, because I'd been offering Thai yoga massage and I'd been doing a lot of private yoga sessions with people for years and years. My private yoga sessions kind of merged with Thai yoga massage, where I would do a lot of hands-on assists, putting people in movement and stretching and massaging them from there. And then when I was doing this, I was at a Pilates studio actually, that offered like kind of yoga on the side. And the Pilates studio had all these like foam rollers and tennis balls and lacrosse balls. And so I started, using these tools to stretch and massage people also, right? So it's just like another component of like how to get people to release tension. I mean, like if you think about it, all these modalities are trying to do the same thing, right? In terms of a physiological level, they're trying to stretch, strengthen, and create more range of motion. Stress release too. The whole mind aspect of it is a different thing, because one of the things that I was noticing when I was using the lacrosse balls and the foam rollers, people would automatically start gritting their teeth and breathing hard. And I'm like, well, shoot, this is not at all what I was intending, right? This is more like, like when I would do the same thing, but with my hand in terms of like giving them something to release onto, over, or with, then all of a sudden their experience, would change drastically, right? Their breath would even out, they would lighten up. And it was like, you could just see their response in their body and of course in the mind. And so I was just thinking like, I've got to find something that, something like that feels more like a hand in a way, right? Something that's more tactile and that people can relax into. And so I finally, after, years of fooling around with like lots of different, you should see like how many, my closet of like collection of all these different tools and balls and, mushroom shaped things and all kinds of stuff. Then I finally after we opened the studio, said, you know what, this is enough's enough. Like I know pretty well what it is that I'm looking for. I've done the work in terms of like trying out all kinds of different products. And so I created something that was kind of like just right, the Goldilocks, right? So it's just the right size, just the right density, just the right feel, so that your nervous system kind of accepts it. In a way, it sort of feels like a big old soft, squishy hand that you can relax into, but it's pretty intense. So it's one of those like, your nervous system's like, oh, that's an intense sensation, but I can trust and let go around it. So I don't know. I just kind of tuned into just the right, again, just the right size, density, and all that kind of thing made a huge difference for people. I've gotten, great response on it. And people are using it in ways, again, this is kind of like, you never quite know how people are going to use it once you introduce it into the world. But I've gotten amazing feedback on it. And yeah, I mean, it's people who are, athletes are all of a sudden getting, better time in their runs. Women who, just had babies or are pregnant. This is like a game changer. So I've gotten a lot of good responses on it.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I think it's really cool to kind of like look at what is working and what's not working for you and what you're doing. And then I love that you're just like, none of this is working. I'm going to create my own product. Like I know, I know what's going to work best. So I think that that's a really cool way to approach that. And I'm curious, like, what is the actual process of going about designing a yoga ball from scratch? Like, I feel like I wouldn't even have any idea of where to start with that.
Well, yeah, the process is essentially not fun. It actually took us a long time. I mean, it took us actually close to a year to like actually have these things in our hand. We tried umpteen number of manufacturers, and we wanted something that was, free of all the bad stuff, and the right, but at the same time, the right kind of quality. And there's this whole thing called an import-export business for a reason, So, for a long time, we were trying to manufacture through China because everything, like all of our roads kept leading to China. So we were like, I guess this is what we have to do. And then finally, we had a breakthrough. I found a manufacturer in Italy, and I realized that they already had a product that was pretty close to what I was looking for. And so at that point, it was more of just, finding, again, like the right density and size, but the product, like the actual quality, it was what we had been looking for all along. So it took a long time, and it was a huge learning process. And I don't think I will ever do it again. I think it was like, yeah, this is done. We're done.
Yeah. I mean, you must have just been like scouring the internet, like trying so many different types of Google searches to see what's going to pop up.
Yeah. And I mean, again, there's a lot of product out there, but the quality is just usually not. I mean, it's so surprising. Like one little ball should not be this hard to find. And so that's what we just kept like going, what is going on? Like, why can't we find something? We're like, we should be able to find something. So anyway, so once we finally did and got the ball rolling, then it was just a matter of getting them to us. And that in itself was a whole huge long process. So, they literally came in on a boat from Italy.
Wow. Just like boxes and boxes of these balls.
Yes. So it was definitely a learning experience. There's a reason why there's a whole industry built around this, so many things we didn't know we had to do, and, people to pay along the way. But I'm so glad we did. I just had a sold out workshop 2 days ago, the first one that I offered. And, I have, teachers and physical therapists and all kinds of people coming to experience it. And I have a training coming up on it too, which will offer you an actual certification. So that's going to be fun. So I've learned a lot along the way.
Yeah. As if running a studio and being a teacher wasn't enough. Just
right.
to add a product on top of it.
That's how we roll, but
Yeah, no, I love it. Good puns too.
That's right.
So did you guys when you guys were looking at these Chinese suppliers, would you guys order some of the products and get a feel for what they were like? Okay. And it's consistently just okay, it probably takes forever to get there, first of all. And then were you getting it and just finding that the quality just wasn't good?
Correct. And then we were also finding that all of their promises of it being free of what, this, that, and the other wasn't actually true. So a lot of times what you would get was not at all what you ordered. So we had a huge learning curve. I mean, we went through, I don't even know how many, I would probably say close to a dozen different manufacturers until we finally landed on the one that we would use. So the thing is, like, there's even if you go into a trade show and you hold a product and you say, this is what I want to order. When you actually go to, when you place the order and receive something, it's not necessarily what you thought you were getting. So it's pretty tricky. I mean, there's a reason why there's a whole business related around this. A lot of people, like Under Armour, these big companies, they have somebody going there to the factory and saying, doing quality check. And of course we didn't have that. And so we were just, we were pretty gullible, and we thought that we were going to get the product that was promised to us, and more times than not, we did not get it. So it was definitely a big learning curve.
Yeah, definitely. And then did you find the Italian supplier through like a website, or was it just like you found them kind of off on their own and then reached out to them?
Yeah. So like I said, we had started, our searches were like myofascial release balls. And then all of a sudden we realized, well, that title, which, that's what these things are. They are myofascial release balls. But what that title does is like so incredibly limiting your search. And so we started getting really creative in the stuff that we were searching, because we realized that these balls were not, these are not intended. The balls that the manufacturer that we ended up using, they were not originally creating these balls as myofascial release balls. Do you see what I mean? Mm-hmm. But with a little bit of tweaking of, like I said, the consistency and the density and whatnot, all of a sudden I realized that, well, these are actually perfect myofascial release balls. So we had to get really creative in our searches. We started, like I said, not using those terms to see what we'd come up with.
Wow.
And so we had to actually kind of go outside of that world of massage balls in order to find the massage balls.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you are probably very familiar with the depths of the internet in terms of different varieties of sport very massage much. Yoga balls that are offered across the planet.
Oh, yes. Across the planet.
And so then you found the manufacturer, you made the tweaks with them, and then did they send you like a test run of them so that you could like make sure they were good before you got like 40 boxes delivered?
Yes, absolutely. And, you have to remember, again, I mean, we're small potatoes. Like, these companies are used to, supplying Olympic, teams of, around the world. And so in order to do that, you have to invest pretty heavily up front, because if they're going to, change up their machinery or whatever to, manufacture this thing, it's a not an insignificant investment. So you have to be kind of like, well, I think this is right. And you have to be, willing to make that mistake and and that's that, we did that. Like I said, we did that with about a dozen manufacturers. Now, those, because we hadn't gone to that next level of, the subtle tweaks, right? We didn't have to go, this is the only company that we really invested in order to get that like final product. And then once we got that final product, they sent a couple of those samples to us. And then we would have to say, yes, no, little tweak here and there. And then that's when we got, the big shipment.
Yeah.
So
something, and that's amazing. But something I'm curious about is like, I think that it's really hard when you're like a newer and smaller business to like make the decision to make these big investments. Was there like any point where you were like, okay, we can't do this? Or were you just like, no, I'm fully
Yes,
trusting that
absolutely.
like this will work?
That's like the story of my life, right? It's like, I had no idea this was going to be so hard, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then why am I doing this? But I just kept coming back to, I've spent close to a decade now kind of refining my method on this and teaching people how to do this. And I knew this was the last little bit, kind of manufacturing the ball in the way that I'd been wanting it. This was like sort of like the last little bit and going the distance. So, so that's, we've learned in terms of, having our business now, we've learned that there's some things that you do that you invest in that just don't work. And that's part of having the business, and like you have to kind of be able to stomach a little bit of failure and, loss. And it's not easy. It's not fun.
Yeah.
But, so it comes with the territory, and, you kind of cry for a day, and then you pick yourself up and just keep going. Right.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely does not sound easy. Like I think sometimes people kind of get it in their head that they'll like do certain things because it'll be easier. Like, oh, maybe it'll be easier to teach more yoga if I just have my own yoga studio. But I think that that's like setting yourself up for failure because you haven't really like anticipated all the challenges that come with like being a business owner then, and having to do all of that other stuff and make these big decisions where you're like we don't have crystal balls that tell us the future. It's not like you can just go consult your crystal ball and be like, oh, does the Nadi Ball become super successful, or is this like the worst investment of my life? You just kind of have to you just have to trust.
Yeah. And that's so intriguing you say that, because I have to say there was something that I did with my family not long ago that really hit home, like what you're talking about. My husband had a family reunion in Atlanta. And so we went, we did like a behind the scenes tour of the aquarium there.
Mm-hmm.
And it blew my mind. The amount of time and investment and care that goes on behind the scenes is literally mind-boggling. It's, I had been to Atlanta Aquarium before, and I don't know if you've ever been there, but
I've been. It's cool. It's like an amazing aquarium. Yeah,
so amazing. And so, I remember like going and just being like, oh, this is so fun, and like I get to see pretty fish, and this is awesome. And then when I like saw behind the scenes everything that goes into it, and everybody's like blood, sweat, and tears, it's just all of a sudden I realized like almost everything that I consume and experience is like that. Like so many things that I just kind of go, I pop over to my coffee shop and I get a coffee and then I leave and it's nice for me. But what went into getting that coffee is when you actually start to sit down and like think about and realize what your experience of your day, like how many people had to help create that, it is pretty humbling. And that's very much the experience of having, owning a business and developing product. And it's not that I'm, looking for, even necessarily looking for anybody to recognize that. I'm just saying that I've recognized that now being on the other side of things. And so I have to remember, right, when I'm talking to people who don't know all of those things, like who just experienced that, who just experienced the aquarium on the outside, right?
Yeah.
They don't know all the stuff that went into it. And so what they're asking for, I might be like, what are you talking about? You have no idea really what went into this thing, but they don't, that hasn't entered their realm of experience. And so that's part of what I was talking about before, about sort of being really clear in your communication, right? Realizing what, the teacher or the student is asking you, even if it might be absurd. Like if they be like, they actually have no idea what really went into what it is that they just experienced. So you have to just be really humble about that and just be like, you know what? It is what it is. They are seeing it from one side, right? And so sometimes you can explain those things to them, and all of a sudden it's like, wow, they actually appreciate it more,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I love that a ton. I've thought about the same thing. I went on a coffee tour in Guatemala last year, and I thought about how, or I learned about how coffee was made, and I was like, it's kind of a miracle that, like, especially for me being Canadian, like, it's kind of a miracle that we get Canada, or that we get coffee up in Canada, because like
Right.
we can't grow it in Canada. The US can't either, other than I think like Hawaii. And
Right.
it's like pretty amazing that somebody was like, oh, let me like take out the seed from this fruit and dry it out in the sun for like a month, and then like think to burn it, and then like ground it up and put it in hot water. Like, who
I
on
know.
earth thought to do that? And yet somehow we have
Right.
it every single day.
And it's like, I really have so much gratitude for this cup of coffee now, you know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's almost everything you experience has a story like that. And so, yeah, so that's been really eye-opening for me in so many aspects of my life because of that.
Yeah, yeah. Something else that I love that you touched on, and this is something that I kind of went through personally, was when I transitioned from working full time to doing more contract work and working for myself. I would find that it was really frustrating when I went to family reunions and nobody really understood what I did. Like, it was kind of like, oh, if I'm not in Canada, then I must not be working. Yet it's like, people are like, well, your parents aren't funding you, so we're not really sure how you're doing this type thing. And
Right.
I was listening to this episode of the Biz Chicks podcast, I think it was, and she was talking about how it's our responsibility to tell people like what we do and what we offer, and we can't just expect people to know. And I felt like that was really eye-opening to me, because I was like, okay, so if somebody doesn't understand what I do or how I make money, that's kind of on me. It's not on them. Like,
Right.
why should they know in their busy lives the behind the scenes of my life?
Right.
So,
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's more meaningful too. I mean, you know, once they know that about you, then all of a sudden you have a deeper connection, you know? So yeah, it's meaningful. It's beneficial for everybody.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I love that. And so I'm curious, you've kind of touched on this a little bit, but what has been like the response since launching the Nadi Ball? Yeah, what has been the response like so far?
So far it's been extraordinary. I mean, I have people who, you know, experience at one time and then come back to me and say, you know, I was in line to have, you know, back surgery. And because I use this ball, all of a sudden I'm not having any sciatica pain. And, you know, this has changed my life. And I hear that over and over and over again. Not just, you know, with extreme situations like that, but like I said before, like athletes who all of a sudden, you know, had hit a wall and weren't progressing. All of a sudden they, you know, hit another level with their performance, and just stress release in general, like, because it works the fascial layer, boosts immune system and helps you relax. So people sleep better. You know, one of the great things about yoga for me is helping people off whenever they're in their daily life, right? So not on the mat, right? Like when you're on your mat, it's kind of, you know, that's when you put in the work to reap the benefit of when you walk out the door. So that throughout your daily life, that's when you feel better, right? So that's always been the goal with these balls. And so far, so good.
Amazing. I love that. And you've also touched on this a little bit, but I'm curious, are there any other big business lessons that you haven't mentioned that you've learned through not only developing the product, but also like launching a new product? I'm curious kind of like what that's been like.
Yes. So we have 19 videos that we've, like short videos that I created, so that when people, when they buy the product, right, they'll be able to go home and use it. Because a lot of times, you know, oftentimes I'll have people who come to class, you know, because I do 2 group Nadi and Nice body rolling classes a week. And people come in and say like, when I'm here, I feel like I know what I'm doing. And then when I get home, I forget it all. Right. So,
Fair.
so we have yeah, exactly. Totally fair. And so that's why I created the 19 short videos. And what I'm trying to do with this product is like open it up to whoever wants to use it for free in terms of the videos and, me answering questions about it. You can use your lacrosse ball and tennis ball and follow along with my videos. Like you don't even necessarily have to buy the Nadi Ball. You can do the Nadi Nice method without even using that ball. It's just that the ball that I found particularly useful for this method, right? So it's all about like spreading it out. We're not trying to keep it proprietary. I am offering trainings for the Nadi Nice method because I think that's really valuable, right? For people to understand what it is they're doing. But I'm hoping that people, riff on it, make it their own. Once you understand the basics of it, that's what a healthy, a healthy anything like yoga, if it's healthy, it's growing, it's evolving, Same thing with this Nadi Nice method, right? I'd love to see it growing and evolving. So that's one of the things that we're trying to do.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. Being able to create videos so that people can actually learn how to do it. Because, I've used some yoga tune-up balls at the studio that I work for in Canada. And it's always interesting because every time I've ever taught a class with them, somebody buys them after. And because they like the way they feel, like it's like self-massage. Okay, I can save myself $100 on a massage by just having these like $20 balls type thing. But I do think like actually knowing how to use them is important because I feel like I've had the same experience where I get home and I'm like, okay, I'm going to try this thing that I learned in class. And then I'm like, I don't remember how to do it. How did the teacher do this again?
Right. I know I went here, but then what?
Yeah, for sure. It doesn't feel quite the same when I do it myself.
Yeah.
And so other than trainings, what else is kind of coming next for the Nadi Ball as well as for SyteraYoga in general?
Well, we have the two different size balls, right? So what's happening with the Nadi and Nice method, you use both of them. A lot of times I'll literally use both of the balls in two different places at the same time. So, so I think there's definitely, plenty to do with keep refining that the way that we use them. Right now, the training that I'm offering is a level 1 training. I'm going to be taking it up to level 2 and level 3 within the year. So what that means is in the trainings, starts out with basically, just understanding what it is that we're doing and why and how all this stuff is connected. And then the level 2 and level 3 trainings are much more, nuanced and pretty powerful stuff. I do this with my private clients, when it's one-on-one. But it's definitely something that, you have to know what you're doing and have to be able to pay attention to people. So, so I think that's the keep staying with the trainings for now, and just making those really robust is what we're focusing on.
Awesome. That's amazing. And if people want to learn more about the trainings or purchase a ball or check out the ball, where can they go to find that?
So on our website, there's a link there on SyteraYoga website. And then we also have nadiball.com, and it's NADI ball, BALL.com. And so you'll be able to find workshops and trainings and purchase them there.
Awesome. Amazing.
Yeah.
I will make sure that there's links to that in the show notes. And thank you again for taking the time to chat with me. It's been super awesome getting to catch up with you for the third time for the podcast. And I just love like the growth that you've had in your business over the last couple of years. It's been really cool to watch.
Thank you.
All right, guys, I hope that you enjoyed that episode of the podcast with Sytera Field from SyteraYoga. Make sure you go check out what they're up to at SyteraYoga.com as well as NadiBall.com. And there's also, like she said, a tab for the Nadi Ball right on their homepage at SyteraYoga. And that's where you can order the balls if you're interested in them. You can also learn more on their YouTube channel, which there's links for and all that good stuff on their website. So I have put links for all of that, including the training, on the website for the show notes for this. So it's under mbomyoga.com, and then you can just search under podcasts and it'll be the most recent one. So if you're interested in any of that, definitely make sure you go check it out. If you have any questions, comments, or anything for Sytera on the product side of things, definitely just make sure that you reach out. As always, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Mastering the Business of Yoga, and you can join the private Facebook community at Yoga Business Badasses. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next week. Namaste.